Coming up on Bridge City News. In an effort to combat COVID-19, the federal government has released details of a new $82 billion aid package. While millions around the world are dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, we speak to a business owner in Ontario who thinks it's a hoax. And we have an update from officials at Exhibition Park who explain how more events are being canceled due to COVID-19.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The province is going to be enforcing measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. To protect the health and safety of Albertans, law enforcement agencies have been granted the power to enforce public health orders and issue fines. In addition, it is now mandatory for travelers returning from outside of Canada to self-isolate for 14 days. Fines have increased from $100 to a prescribed fine of $1,000 per occurrence. Depending upon the severity, courts will also have increased powers to administer fines up to $100,000 for a first offence and then up to $500,000 for a subsequent offence. Any person who has traveled outside of Canada must go into mandatory self-isolation upon their return. And anyone showing any signs of the coronavirus must self-isolate for a minimum of 10 days, and mass gatherings must be limited to no more than 50 people. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says for the most part, Albertans are doing their part and are being responsible.
That we all have a role to play in limiting the spread of the disease by staying at home as much as possible, practicing rigorous personal hygiene, maintaining a safe distance from other people, and respecting the restrictions that have been put in place to limit social interaction. But sadly, not everyone seems to get it. Too many people continue to ignore these guidelines that have been issued by Dr. Hinshaw and the government of Alberta. As I said before, too many people are ignoring our public health guidelines, and in so doing, they endanger the health of others, particularly the most vulnerable.
We have confirmed 61 new cases of COVID-19. This means 419 cases have now been identified in our province. We suspect up to 33 of the 419 cases may be community transmission, which is 5 more than we talked about yesterday.
Albertans who have been self-isolating due to the COVID-19 pandemic can now apply for financial support from the province. Last week, government officials announced $50 million in financial support for those who are self-isolating. A one-time payment of $1,146 is available for those who meet the criteria. Some of the criteria is that you were working and experienced total or significant loss of income to self-isolation, or care for a dependent who is in self-isolation and can apply for emergency isolation support. And if they have been diagnosed with the novel coronavirus, if they are caring for a dependent who is self-isolating, they have been directed by provincial health officials to self-isolate, or they are not receiving compensation from any other source. The House of Commons adopted emergency legislation for up to $82 billion in relief for Canadians impacted by the COVID-19 outbreak. The bill will deliver financial aid and tax deferrals to individuals and business owners hit hard by the economic impact of the outbreak.
We have put forward measures here today that we believe are going to enable us to support Canadians and also to support Canadian businesses. So we think that that is the way we should be moving ourselves forward. We have put forward measures that will, in fact, provide every Canadian who is finding himself or herself away from work because of sickness, quarantine, supporting one of their elderly parents, supporting one of their children who might be away from school due to sickness or just because they're away from school. Our measure would ensure that every Canadian who is off work for any reason that is meaning that they are not going to be able to have the income that they previously had, and they had income the year before, will be able to get a wage subsidy for them. And that, of course, will be very important in allowing them to deal with the challenge that they're facing.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says new federal benefits for those losing income due to COVID-19 will be in people's pockets within 10 days of their applications.
The Canada Emergency Response Benefit will provide $2,000 a month for the next 4 months for workers who lose their income as a result of COVID-19. This will replace the 2 benefits we announced last week, the Emergency Care Benefit and the Emergency Support Benefit, in order to streamline the process. If you've lost your job because of COVID-19, whether you're full-time, contract, or self-employed, this new benefit will be there for you. If you're sick or quarantined, looking after someone sick, or at home taking care of your kids, it's there for you. And even if you're still employed but not receiving income because of this crisis, the CERB is there for you.
Meanwhile, in the United States, the White House and senators struck an agreement on a $2 trillion measure to aid workers and businesses there. The funds also support an already strained healthcare system.
It's good news for the doctors and nurses in emergency rooms around the country who are waiting for more masks and more funding. It's good news for families all across America. At last, we have a deal. After days of intense discussions, the Senate has reached a bipartisan agreement on a historic relief package for this pandemic. It will rush new resources onto the front lines of our nation's healthcare fight, and it will inject trillions of dollars of cash into the economy as fast as possible to help American workers, families, small businesses, and industries make it through this disruption and emerge on the other side ready to soar.
Now, coming back to our country, across Canada, there are now close to 2,000 cases of COVID-19. Nationally, 25 people have died from the virus, including 2 here in our province. In British Columbia, meanwhile, they now have 617 COVID-19 cases, with a majority of them in the Vancouver area. The BC Provincial Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, says staying in touch by virtual means or phone calls will help during the pandemic.
We do not have any additional deaths to report, so we remain at 13 today. We know that there is circulation and there is risk across the province right now. The majority of our cases are in the Lower Mainland, but no community in this province is immune. And we know this virus can spread with people having very minimal symptoms. And that is our rationale for making sure that we all take these physical distancing measures that we've been talking about in the last little while. The way we break the chains of transmission are making sure that we're not close enough that this virus can spread between people.
A few weeks ago, Canadian Blood Services saw a spike in cancellations. Since that time, they've released a call to all healthy Canadians to come out and help give the gift of life. The centre in Lethbridge has remained open, but with a few changes to help with health and safety.
We have a routine cleaning and infection control and screening practice already. And in light of the recent developments with COVID-19, we've introduced enhanced cleaning measures into our donor centers, physical distancing measures in our donor centers, as well as an active wellness station at the entrance. So we're stopping anyone who's going to enter our donor center, asking them about any recent travel history in the last 14 days, or if they're experiencing any symptoms, even mild, and then we are asking them not to enter our donor center.
According to Canadian Blood Services, every minute of every day, someone in Canada requires a blood transfusion. The COVID-19 pandemic has created challenges across every aspect of society. Addressing basic needs of food security are even more important in today's world. The University of Lethbridge has created campus care parcels to help with that need.
Today we have gathered about 200 bags of groceries, and we've arranged to distribute it to students who particularly need food. And so we're going to be handing it out in the next few hours. We know it has a huge impact because I get messages from students afterwards. I've run into students after they've graduated who said this was like the best thing at the end of the term. I think this year it's going to be even more so, because even if students have money, they can't get to the grocery stores, and if they get there, a lot of things just aren't there. So. This food was all purchased a few weeks ago, so it's all been quarantined, so we know it's safe, and it was when you could still buy canned tuna.
Exhibition Park was set up and ready for the 2020 Home and Garden Show, but today fell victim to the COVID-19 pandemic and was cancelled. Video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly was at the grounds with additional details about the venue's plans moving forward.
That's just the start for Exhibition Park. They will be laying off 80% of their permanent employees effective on March 31st. When I spoke to CEO Rudy Friesen, he said that it will be challenging for them to plan for future events like Whoop Up Days.
It's probably an annual planning cycle for Whoop Up Days. So some things started already after the conclusion last year. It's all been put on hold. It's a difficult thing. So yes, for example, the planning components of everything that we do now is going to be condensed at the very least, even if there's an expectation that programs would go forward later on in the year. This is impactful for everyone. I think the focus from our perspective right now is not about this event or that event. I think from a larger perspective, for me, we're an organization that's been in this community 122 years. We need to do what we can to make sure that we're in this community for another 122 years, and that's our focus right now.
In addition, the weekly farmers market hosted by Exhibition Park will be postponed indefinitely. Now, we could all use a little therapy right now as we tackle yet another week during the coronavirus crisis. Blue Rain Ranch is hoping to continue their unique approach through horses to spread peace versus fear during this time of the unknown.
I've sent out a letter to all my clients letting them know that we're taking measures to mitigate any risks that may be associated with the virus. We're spacing our sessions minimum half hour apart. We're washing all our equipment down between clients. We're asking parents that they wait in the car, if I'm working with their children in the riding arena. So we're still seeing clients, but we're just trying to be as safe as possible so that, they can rest assured that, they're being taken care of here. I want to keep going as long as we can because I do feel that now, especially, this is very important that people receive the mental health support they need.
For more information on how you can find tranquility through horses, you can always visit the Blue Rain Ranch website. Local musicians in Lethbridge are feeling the pinch of COVID-19. Gary Drayton, who plays with the Steve Keenan Band, says members of the group understand the move to shut down shows and trying to maintain social distancing is a top priority.
As far as the band, everybody's accepting the fact that things have shut down for that reason. It's a way to keep everybody safe because if we're all sick, there's not going to be a lot of music being made. We're a rock blues oriented band, but there's a little bit of southern rock involved in there and quite a few different genres that we've all played, so of course it's coming out in the music. We're halfway through our album, maybe a little bit more than half, but we have put it on hold.
The Steve Keenan Band is hoping that they can release their new album sometime in June. While many businesses have closed because of the coronavirus pandemic, the liquor stores surprisingly remain open. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, says there's a big reason why they are still open and considered an essential service.
Public health officials are very upfront. They said, look, there are a lot of people who are addicted. You may not notice it. We're not talking about people that you're going to see out on the street, but a lot of people are addicted. And one of the things they're worried about is if you remove the supply of alcohol, suddenly you're going to have a whole pile of people go into withdrawal and then seek medical help.
There are now over 446,000 people around the world who have tested positive for COVID-19. There have also been close to 20,000 deaths. Millions of people around the world are in self-isolation, and social distancing of 2 meters has become a reality, especially here in Canada. There are those, however, who are not buying into the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a business in Ontario called the Yummy Mummy Emporium, whose owner posted this to social media recently. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic hoax, we are canceling nothing. You can come over here with a fever and cough all you want. We know that germs don't cause disease. You're welcome to visit us for March break, while fools cancel everything according to government propaganda. Amanda Vollmer, the owner of Yummy Mummy Emporium, joins me now from Minden, Ontario. Amanda, with the entire world battling the novel coronavirus, you believe this is a hoax? How did you come up with that?
Well, to understand the definition of a hoax means basically a falsity or a lie behind that information. So it's not that people aren't dying or people aren't sick. I think a lot of people mistake that. There has to be background information and understanding how time and time again, each year, we have some sort of an emergency like a SARS or an H1N1 or a measles or whatever. And the government uses these to fear the public into a non-thinking position to sell them drugs and vaccines. This is not news. This is well known in the community that I am with people who are educated in this. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. It's problem, reaction, solution.
So Amanda, what kind of backlash have you received on social media and to your business so far?
Well, it's an interesting display. First of all, I've done today a public notice just to help people understand why I made that post the way I did, because I think it was taken out of context and in a very, it hit a nerve, right? So I did get a lot of hate mail. I've had attempts, people saying they want to kill me. People say they are going to work at every angle to destroy me, and really some very angry words. But on the other hand, I've also had as much support and love and care and thank you for speaking for us because we're too afraid to. We would love to say this to our friends and families, but if we at least open our mouth one word of it, 5G or whatnot, we're blamed, we're named, and we're called, quacks and conspiracies and all this stuff. Or what kind of background do you have? And nobody wants to listen. And really, my frustration came through in that post because I feel like we're not listening and we're not learning. And so my study of the germ theory and the errors in that theory and the understanding that we have bacteria in our blood that is pleomorphic, which means it changes shape depending on the environment, and also that we earn our diseases. That's very important for prevention and for understanding nutrition is vital for staying healthy and preventing any type of chronic illness or acute illness.
Amanda Vollmer from the Yummy Mummy Emporium, thanks a lot for joining me today from Minden, Ontario.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Buckingham Palace confirmed that Prince Charles has tested positive for COVID-19. The 71-year-old is said to have only mild symptoms and is self-isolating in Scotland. His wife, Camilla, who is 72, tested negative for the virus. Tests on the couple were carried out by the National Health Service in Scotland. The Prince last saw the Queen on March the 12th. No word yet if Queen Elizabeth also has COVID-19. She remains at her home in Windsor. As you've heard on Bridge City News, the Tokyo Olympics have been postponed to 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. Delaying the Summer Games for a year has brought about a mix of disappointment and understanding from many of the athletes.
Yeah, waking up today, it was tough. To wake up and the first thing you see is that news. But on the other hand, I guess I kind of consider myself an optimist and try to see, the best in every situation.
So I believe it is the right decision. It definitely comes with a lot of emotions, but I also believe that as human beings, we're able to get through that. There's mixed emotions, frustration, of course. There's a plan in place, and you follow that plan, and then there's that end result. Obviously, that date has changed, those plans have changed, but as always, plans do change.
It was the news that no one wanted to hear, but we were all kind of expecting. And I truly believe that the IOC and U.S. Paralympics and Olympics truly did make the right decision. As an athlete, I can see it through the athlete's eyes that this is a huge, huge disappointment. But I also work in healthcare, and I see, the devastating effects that this virus has had on our country.
We had some flurry activity earlier in the day today and cool. Fortunately, that trend will not last. Sunshine and warmer temperatures are on the way. Complete weather details are coming up. It was cloudy and cool again today. Tonight, a chance of flurries developing with a low near -9. Tomorrow, a high-pressure system returns, clearing out the clouds and bringing us a high near 7. Friday, mainly sunny with the mercury climbing to 9 degrees. A nice weekend is shaping up. Sunny and 11 on Saturday, sunshine again at 12 degrees for Sunday. Monday, the clouds return, but we should still see a high of 8 degrees. Tuesday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 3. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 8 degrees and an average low of -5. The highest temperature of the state was recorded in 1999 at 20 degrees, and the record low -27 in 1955. Sunrise was at 7:22, sunset at 7:52. Let's see how tomorrow's looking across the country now. Expect rain and 10 in both Victoria and Vancouver, BC. Just a few clouds and 8 degrees is on tap for Calgary on Thursday. A mixture of sun and cloud and 7 for Edmonton. Sunshine and 5 degrees is on tap for Regina. Mainly sunny and 4 for Saskatoon tomorrow. There's a good chance of flurries and 0 for Winnipeg. Showers and 12 degrees for Toronto tomorrow. Expect rain and 9 degrees in Ottawa. Overcast and 5 for Montreal. Lots of clouds and 6 degrees for Fredericton, New Brunswick. Snow mixed with ice pellets and +1 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Mainly cloudy and +1 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, which was dealt with a winter storm warning today, expect overcast conditions tomorrow and a high near +1. Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau says emergency benefits for workers impacted by COVID-19 will come next month. Morneau says the ups for the Canada Child Benefit and GST will come in May. He told the Senate there are just not enough faster ways to get the money into the hands of those who need it the most. The Senate is debating the $82 billion coronavirus aid package passed unanimously by the House of Commons last night. A group representing small business says members' confidence has fallen to a record low amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business says it is the latest business barometer has fallen from 60.5 in February to 30.8 today. It says 38% of small business owners surveyed said they are doing poorly. That compared to just 20% who reported their business is in a good state. Half said they are planning layoffs over the next few months. A new poll indicates the job losses across the country are being suffered due to the impact of the novel coronavirus. The Angus Reid survey found 44% of respondents had lost work or someone in their household because of the outbreak. Another 18% say they're expected to lose work very soon. More than half who lost work said their employers were not compensating them. Many also said they had a difficult time getting employment insurance. Leon's is temporarily closing 72 of its 205 corporate-owned stores across Canada. The company is also laying off about half of its staff amid the coronavirus pandemic. It says it will offer supplemental payments to 3,900 employees being laid off on top of any employment insurance benefits. The company's retail banners include Leon's, The Brick Mattress Store, and Appliance Canada. Leon's joins other businesses across the country that have cut staff to deal with the economic slowdown caused by measures taken to slow the spread of COVID-19. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 568 points on the day to 13,139. The Dow was up 495 points to 21,200. The S&P 500 was up 28 points to 2475, and the Nasdaq was down 33 points to 7384. Oil was up 28 cents to $24.29 per barrel. Natural gas was up a penny to $1.66. Gold was down 50 cents to $16.40 an ounce, and silver was down 3 cents to $14.45 an ounce. Wheat is at $235 per metric ton. Barley's also at $235. Canola's at $4.67, and corn is at $262 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $2.30 to $110.65. Feeder cattle were up $1.85 to $132.58. Lean hogs were down 58 cents to $67.45. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 70.42 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the House of Commons adopted emergency legislation for up to $82 billion in relief for Canadians impacted by the COVID-19 outbreak. The bill will deliver financial aid and tax deferrals to individuals and business owners hit hard by the economic impact of the outbreak. The bill is now being debated in the Senate. There were a staggering number of Canadians who applied for employment insurance last week. Toronto Sun journalist Brian Lilly will have the details coming up in just a moment. Provinces and cities across the country continue to declare a state of emergency. There have been more calls for more people and businesses to lock down, but many of them have not. To talk more about it is Toronto Sun journalist Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Now, Brian, Ottawa has not yet called for a federal emergency. Why not?
Well, because for the most part, the Federal Emergencies Act, as it's called, that's the replacement for the War Measures Act that came into effect in 1988. If you want to go with Mr. Peabody into the Wayback Machine, it basically doesn't give the federal government a whole lot of powers that the provinces don't already have. And so a couple of provinces, notably New Brunswick's Blaine Higgs, have said, no, we want the Federal Emergencies Act. But everyone from Premier Kenney in Alberta, Premier Ford in Ontario, Premier Legault in Quebec have said, no, hold on. We are handling this. We are reacting as our local populations need. Each of the provinces is having its own problems. British Columbia, right next to you, they're having the worst time of it. I mean, for the size of their population, their infection rate is much higher than anyone else. They are dealing with it on their own level, to the point where Vancouver has enacted, some powers that a lot of municipalities don't have. So, I was on a conference call. I was on a media conference call with the Prime Minister the other day, and I asked him that very question. What powers will it give you that you don't already have? And he said, mostly it's about taking powers away from the provinces, or in some cases municipalities, and giving them to the federal government. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is very willing to work with the provinces. He has regular conference calls with them to say, are you looking after this on your own? What measures are you enacting? Do you need help? And most of the premiers are saying, we're good right now. We're looking after this. We don't need the feds to take over at this point. But I will add this, it hasn't been ruled out yet.
The number of people who returned to Canada in the last week is staggering, Brian. What are the numbers looking like from the Canada Border Services Agency?
More than 900,000 Canadians or permanent residents returning in the last week. The majority of them, if I'm remembering correctly, it's about 500,000 coming by land, about 400 and high change coming by air, or vice versa. But 900,000, and then a small number coming by sea. These are people showing back up from those cruise ships. I don't know who would have gotten on a cruise ship in the last little while. They've effectively been banned from Canadian waters. But more than 900,000 people coming back. I'll include my own parents in that. They just got back to Hamilton, Ontario last Friday. They had been in Florida. They had been expecting to stay until after Easter and then would come back the week after the holiest time in the Christian calendar. But instead, they came back last week because, like so many people, they started hearing from their insurance companies, it's time to come back. So an awful lot of these people are snowbirds who have been down in Florida, they've been in Arizona, they've been in Palm Springs in California, and they've decided, okay, it's time to come back. We have to be worried about that, Hal, because the United States is becoming one of the hotspots for the coronavirus, for COVID-19. So are they bringing it back into the country? Mostly unwittingly. And you have to remember that the majority of this population are in their senior years. They are the most vulnerable. The majority of people that get the coronavirus don't notice symptoms, or it's rather mild in them. But for people with underlying medical conditions or people that are higher in age, it's much more difficult, just like the flu or any other difficult disease, for them to fight off. So this is a major concern for health officials right now.
Brian, a large number of people have applied for employment insurance in the past week. We first heard the number was around 500,000. Now it's close to 1 million people. Brian, can the government really handle this type of uptake in their programs?
Yeah, it's almost about the same number of people that came back to Canada last week, so that has to be worrisome. I believe the number is about 926,000 people that applied, but that number goes up every day. So, by the time, someone looks, I'm sure it's going to be higher. I'm sure it will be over 1 million within a day or so. That will be very difficult. I mean, on a normal week, we're talking 25,000 to 50,000 people will apply for EI. You're multiplying that several times over and then suddenly saying, okay, get the checks out the door. Look, one of the quibbles that some people on the left and the right had with the federal aid package was that it relied on existing programs like EI, like sick leave. Many people, again, on the left and the right, this is one of these moments where political distinctions blur. People have said, no, don't have people apply for programs that are bureaucratic, that require you to go online, fill out a form, have a bureaucrat, determine, Hal, are you eligible? Do you have enough weeks? Are you not? Many are saying just get the checks out the door. That's what the Americans have done. That's what the NDP and some conservatives have called for. We haven't done that. While I've been very supportive of a lot of elements of the federal aid package in terms of trying to look after people and businesses, this could become a bottleneck. And we're going to have to watch this over the coming weeks. Quebec Premier Francois Legault saying he's heard that checks of support and assistance won't be out until April 6th. And he's worried about that because, well, rent's due. Mortgages are due. On when? April the 1st.
Social distancing is the rage right now, keeping about 2 meters between each person. We're learning a lot about this, but some people, Brian, they're not following the rules. What are political leaders saying about the need to follow these rules?
Well, I don't know if you heard the Prime Minister on Monday, but he said enough is enough. Go home. Echoing, statements made by various premiers across the country, various public health officials across the country. Stay home unless you need to go out. Don't go. Now, here's part of the problem, Hal, as you look at, how different provinces, how different cities, different jurisdictions have reacted to this. Everyone's got their own list of what's essential and what's not. And, quite frankly, the list of essential services can be quite long. You might just think, well, it's doctors, nurses, police, paramedics, firefighters. No, it can include accountants. It could include lawyers.
And the media, us too.
Yeah, well, we are determined to be an essential service everywhere. Normally, politicians like to dislike the media. Right now, they're relying on us to get the news and get the information out. But would you have thought that your local pet value would be an essential service? Probably not. But you know, many of us have pets. Where are you going to get your food if all the pet food stores close? Maybe the supermarket, but that may not be the best solution either. Liquor stores, among those that are being kept open. So there's lots of questions around all of this.
Let me ask you something. How is a liquor store considered an essential service? Maybe for some people, but not in my family,
Well, and I've had a lot of questions about that, and public health officials are very upfront. They said, look, there are a lot of people who are addicted. You may not notice it. We're not talking about people that you're going to see out on the street, but a lot of people are addicted. And one of the things they're worried about is if you remove the supply of alcohol, suddenly you're going to have a whole pile of people go into withdrawal and then seek medical help at a time when the medical system does not need to have any other strains put upon it. So, would the number of people seeking medical treatment because they suddenly have no more alcohol, would that, be as big as COVID-19? No, but even if it's half as big, it becomes an extra strain and something that the medical system, be it in Alberta, be it in Ontario, be it in New Brunswick, simply cannot handle. And that's why across the country, these have been left open. Governments have been advised by public health officials, leave beer, wine, and liquor stores open because otherwise you're going to create bigger problems.
Outside of liquor stores, Brian, many other stores around the country may remain open, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can get in because they're limiting the amount of customers. You have to get there, pretty early too, I bet.
Yeah, and I've seen this everywhere from my local No Frills to, yes, my local liquor store to my local Canadian Tire. I'm still going out on a regular basis, limited, but regular basis to make sure that I can get whatever supplies I need. I try and get into the store and out of the store as quickly as possible. But you're seeing these taped off segments on the floor how. In some stores, they're very officious in getting out there and saying, oh, sir, get back. You're too close to the other customer. You can't be that close. You've got to stay. The World Health Organization says 1 meter or 3 feet apart. In Canada, we're saying 6 feet or 2 meters apart. And that's what stores are putting out there. So, local Canadian Tire up the street from me, they've got painter's tape across the floor detailing where you can stand in line. My local No Frills up the street has the same thing. But I was trying to get into a grocery store just the other day, and I couldn't. I went in the middle of the day when it's normally quiet. Why? Because I don't want to get the crowds coming home from work. Well, nobody's at work anymore, and so folks are lined up, and they're limiting the number of people to get in the stores, Hal. And it's 30 people standing outside the store because they're only letting 10 to 20 in at a time. I've heard similar stories about banks in Ottawa, about Costco's in Calgary. The list goes on.
What's interesting as well, Brian, is the amount of grocery stores hiring a lot of extra employees, temporary workers right now, to cover off how busy they are. Sobeys, Loblaws, Walmart is hiring another 10,000 people here in Canada alone. Now, when it comes to surviving the pandemic financially, what are the polls really saying when it comes to how long people can survive without some kind of government help?
Well, what it's saying is actually very disturbing. About 10% of people couldn't last to the end of the week. They've got no savings. They've got nothing. If, without government help, if they're pushed out of their job, and many people are, they're going to be in trouble. Another 11%, so 21% in total, will be done by the end of the month. That's got to be worrisome because who's being looked after in all of this? There's some major companies that are paying people to work at home. There are people like us in the media that are working from home, and we've got to keep doing our jobs. But then there are many people at various levels throughout the economy. It's not just frontline retail workers who aren't in grocery stores, Hal. It's throughout the economy. People who are in the private sector who are being told, go home, and by the way, we don't have anything for you. So apply for EI with those other 926,000 people and hope that you get $425 a week as soon as you can. A lot of people are going to be hurt by this. I'm going to predict that in the coming weeks, if this continues, we're going to see a real animosity between the government workers who tend to be better paid, who tend to have better stability, and who are going to continue receiving their paychecks, and those who are sitting at home and not getting a paycheck and are worried, can they make ends meet at the end of the month? Can they put food on the table?
And just a disclaimer as well for our viewers watching at home, we're actually still in studio here. We're not at home. Unless I pull out the old green paint and start splashing it all over my wall in my bedroom, maybe I could do maybe a green screen there. Now, Brian, the Conservative leadership race continues, but now many candidates have signed a joint letter asking for it to be paused because of COVID-19, and they're also asking for some rule changes. Tell me more about those.
Marilyn Gladue, Rudy Husney, and Derek Sloan have all signed a joint letter saying, look, you've got to hold off on calling the leadership. We're supposed to have a final list of who's in and who's out. Now, I believe all the people that have signed off, actually, Derek Sloan's in. I'm not sure about Husney and Gladue. We're supposed to have a final list by the end of the week. And after that cutoff, you're in or you're out. Derek Sloan, Leslyn Lewis, two of the social conservative candidates, plus Aaron O'Toole and Peter MacKay are in. But Gladue and Husney, I think, are still struggling to meet that final part. Rick Peterson suspended his campaign, said, look, you can't fundraise in the middle of this. You can't go out and get signatures in the middle of this. It's time to shut this down. But the party has remained, in the words of some, completely tone deaf to this. Peter MacKay has said, look, let's just have a vote sooner rather than later. Why drag this out until June? Let's call the vote now and have a real opposition leader standing up to Justin Trudeau. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I will tell you that the leadership of the Conservative Party seems to be floating by on this, Hal. They can't decide whether they're fish or fowl. You know, they can't decide to either, call it sooner or delay it. They just don't have anything definitive to say.
And if they delay it, obviously that works well for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals.
Well, it could, but of course, Parliament isn't exactly sitting on a regular basis. And at times like this, I can tell you, other polling I've seen from DART, the same company that did the polling that I mentioned earlier on how Canadians are feeling, it showed 68% of Canadians, as of about a week or so ago, thought that Justin Trudeau was doing a good job on the handling of the coronavirus. Most provincial premiers were around 70% as well. These are guys that don't normally get approval ratings that high, but people cut political leaders an awful lot of slack. So, I don't see anybody gaining political ground in the middle of this crisis.
One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you, Hal.
Children today are constantly using digital devices, gaming systems, computers, and cell phones. Unfortunately, this does bring with it the risk of encountering online predators. How much responsibility for their safety should we be carrying as parents and adults? To talk more about it is Charlene Doki Bauer, founder of Internet Sense First and author of The Internet, Are Children in Charge? Charlene, welcome back to BCN.
Well, thank you for having me, Hal. It's great to be here.
Charlene, share a little bit about your group and how it all began for you.
The charity Internet Sense First started because we had a family member affected by the crime of child pornography at the age of 4 by neighbors. And yes, I say neighbors. We can't trust anyone anymore, it seems. And eventually she lived her life independently, got into drugs and alcohol, and then was killed by a drunk driver when she was 22. And as a network administrator, I discovered child pornography. I don't talk about the employer because I did a lot of freelancing as well. And you don't know that garbage until you see it. And once that happened, I decided to start a charity in memory of my family member and in support of all children online.
And you do some public speaking and teaching on this, and you have some teaching materials for parents as well?
Mainly my book is probably the best resource for parents because it's very comprehensive. I do speaking. I've spoken in Iceland, Europe, India, the United States, Canada, and I go where I'm asked. And I believe that everyone needs to know about my theory of digital supervision.
Charlene, how many parents actually monitor their kids' online activities? Do we actually know what they're watching, or are we dropping the ball sometimes?
Most parents are dropping the ball all the time, I have to say, because the vulnerabilities of our children are huge now. They can be on any platform, and predators know exactly where they are. That's where they go, where their prey is. And the other big problem is that children are becoming the victimizers because of what they're seeing online. There's an epidemic of child-on-child sexual assault that I can get into in a few minutes and in a little more detail.
But getting back to the predators for just a moment here, Charlene, are a lot of, let's say, adults posing as maybe 13 or 14-year-old boys or girls online?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. 9, 10-year-old children, they can even get machines that will disguise their voice as a young child, which makes it so difficult for our children.
I hear many parents say simply, you know what, I can't keep up. My kids know a lot more about technology than I do. So if that's the case, what do you say to those parents? How do you encourage them?
Well, I encourage them to realize that I'm not pointing my finger at parents that they're not doing a good job. I'm saying that traditional parenting is still necessary, but we need to digitize our parenting. We're very busy taking our children to school, hockey games, basketball, dance classes, and then we give them the key to our router. And these children are the most independent of any generation in the history of the world. And we have to start supervising them while they're on digital devices. In my theory of digital supervision, I've written to be very user-friendly so that parents are not intimidated. We just had a summit in London, and it's called the International Summit to End Internet Child Exploitation. It was very well attended. We had people from Africa, Spain, Colombia, all over the place. One father bought my book, and he said, I can't tell you the relief I have in practicing digital supervision. I actually have a handle on what my children are doing, and I also want 6 more books. And I said, why? You want to read it 7 times? And he said, no, I want it for the parents of my children's friends so that they will be practicing digital supervision as well.
You know, Charlene, parents can't be everywhere all the time, and it's hard to keep track of what our kids are watching. Perhaps parents need to be a little more intentional. Do we need to really map out a plan, that digital plan that you were discussing?
Absolutely. One thing I mentioned in my book is that parents should draw up a contract of use with their children. And I say with them. You sit at the table together with them and say, this is the cell phone. We're docking it at 7 o'clock at night. You can pick it up at 7 o'clock in the morning. We will be going through your cell phone, looking at pictures, because the epidemic of nudes for these children is huge. They're taking pictures of themselves nude, sending them, and even though it's their body, they're producing and distributing child pornography, which then the parents own, because essentially the parents own the cell phone. And when I talk to parents about that, they say, you mean we're responsible? Yes, you are, for a minor's activities, but they cannot own a cell phone until they're 18. So therefore, it is your plan, your phone, your iPad.
Is that considered sexting then, when a lot of these kids are taking pictures of their private parts or nude photos and sending them to each other? Is that what they call
That's
sexting?
sexting. Yes, it is, Hal. And it's epidemic. I've talked to so many principals. Every time I speak in a school, a principal will whisper and say, we've had a child charged for this. And I say, no need to worry about it. It's in every school. It's in Canada, the United States, England, New Zealand. It's everywhere. And if people would start practicing digital supervision, which is user-friendly, they would know what their children are doing.
How about if we took that router and kept it in the parent's bedroom and maybe continually change the password each day?
I advise everyone to put the router in the parental bedroom for 2 reasons. Number one, you can turn it off at night. Someone complained about what about the electronics in the bedroom, and I say it's not going to bother you if it's turned off. And the other reason, you can turn it off, your kids can't turn it on if it's in your bedroom. But the second reason is you're telling your children you're in charge. The location of the router in a common area is not a good idea. If we're paying for it, our children need to know.
I have some parents that tell me, you know what, when you're finished your homework, then I'm going to give you access to the new password for Wi-Fi. And a lot of times the kids do their homework is that they keep changing and updating it each and every day. Now, Charlene, should we also invest in some software to block pornography sites in our homes?
There are two ways of looking at that. You can get software to block pornography, and that will wear off when the child's about 8 or 9. They can work around software very easily. As part of digital supervision, I tell parents to make sure they have a filter between their router and the computer, the host computer. And the router can divide the internet. There's one company that calls it a bright web, so that the child will go up into the bright web and be able to go on the internet without going on sites like that. The unfortunate thing is that does not work when the child is on a cell phone or they're gaming. Gaming can cause a few more issues so that the child cannot be as easily monitored. So parents need to be aware of that and realize that humanity has to supervise humanity. We need to be around the devices. We need to review browser history. And when children realize their parents are reviewing the browser history, as a former educator, I know they'll erase it and put up the science project and the research on history. We need to start looking at the actual history, looking at what they're doing. If a child turns off a monitor as soon as you go into a room, you go in and turn it back on. You don't let them off with that. Who is in charge? Right now, our children are in charge of the internet too often. We need to take charge and take our children back and be able to talk to them and supervise them.
I love that, absolutely. Now, what do we need to teach our kids specifically when it comes to online safety? Avoid chat rooms, for one?
Avoid chatting, avoid sending anything like a picture without the geolocator being turned off, things like that. And what I tell everyone now is that our children in many ways are being given too much ownership for decisions online. For example, a child knowing at the age of 8 whom they should speak with online is asking an awful lot of an 8-year-old. I don't know of an 8-year-old that plans dinner, let alone who they're going to talk to online. It's a tough call, and parents need to be talking to their children a lot about that. They need to be online games to see how their children are communicating online. Is your child a bully or a victim or a victimizer? Are they bullying a child into sending a nude, which is happening too much? Do you know if your child is going to commit suicide? They communicate all this online. If you're not online supporting your children and supervising, we are lacking in our parenting skills. We need to digitize.
You know what's really scary as well at the same time, Charlene, is how much information kids share with strangers as opposed to their own parents who love and care for them. Do parents need to set a firm limit on how much time kids spend on their digital devices? You mentioned something about 7 o'clock, give me your phone until maybe 7 o'clock the next morning, and as well, maybe social media sites?
Yes, now that can be difficult because even when I'm at a business meeting, I'll ask everyone to put their phones away because it's intimidating when someone's looking at a phone and you're a speaker. Try telling a child you're taking away their cell phone, which is why a contract before they even get a cell phone is so important. They're on digital devices too much. Yes, there should be limitations. And it's kind of funny, Hal, at this point that people will tell them you're only going to watch TV tonight. You can't go on the iPad. And I just sort of, that's punishment, is going on television rather than being online. There's just so much in my book about this, taking away a cell phone, what you need to look out for, what you need to look out for with a child that might be groomed by a predator. there's so much in digital supervision, but you know what, Hal? We can all do it, and we have to do it.
Charlene, is it too harsh saying kids should not have cell phones until maybe the age of 14 or 15, or waiting to have an Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, or Facebook account until they're about the same age?
It's not out of the question, but I think my words would be good luck because so many children have them. It's again, if parents are giving the cell phones, tell your children you're going to be checking everything on that cell phone. And I mean everything. You press on every icon. They will create an icon for their nudes that looks as though it's a calculator or just a beach somewhere. Do children lie? Of course they do. I've been a teacher at parent-teacher night, and parents will say, my children never lie to me, and I would look at them and say, well, I lied to my parents. In fact, my poor sainted mother, I probably still tell the odd lie. We do. We want approval from our parents. We want to get off with things that maybe we shouldn't be doing. And this is where digital supervision comes in. Don't let them lie to you about the internet. Supervise. And you mentioned TikTok. TikTok is a very scary environment because kids are doing live streaming of nudes, of dancing and things like that. And I hesitate to mention one environment because this can happen anywhere. We have Facebook, we have FaceTime, we have live streaming everywhere. And predators love to get the live streaming. They are recording it as a child is doing it, but the child thinks it's being erased. And then the predator will sell it. And then when the child might find out who's looking at my pictures today, it's just a never-ending story.
Yeah, it's a dark world we're living in right now. Now, part of the challenge is that your kids will have access to their computers and their phones during school hours, and you're at work. How do you manage that?
Well, for one thing, I advise everyone on a cell phone especially to put a keylogger on. And a keylogger will record every key that a child presses on the cell phone, as well a comprehensive one will record all the pictures. And a parent can put that on before the child even gets the phone, and every night they can have a report sent to them so that they will know exactly what the child is involved in. You can put a type of filter on cell phones. Again, the kids can get around them. They talk about this in school all the time. We get around all that. But the keylogger is a pretty good source. Looking at it is another one. I had one parent actually take her router to work every day.
Wow.
Which, because she had an extreme problem with her child.
Wow.
And it's difficult.
But you know, if the child has a data plan, who needs the router? How many parents actually take the time to sit down with their kids and have a really good heart-to-heart talk about internet safety and the potential consequences?
Very few. I've talked to people just casually about digital supervision. And one fellow said, well, I talked to my 14-year-old son last night and he told me he didn't do anything and I'm good with that. And I'm like, really? Your child is lying. There's no question. The kids are all involved in this stuff. And I looked at him, I thought, no, I don't think I need to go any further. He was just blocking it. He should be looking at the devices every day at random. Take a look. See what your kids are doing. See what pictures are on their galleries. I've interviewed kids in high school that said there are thousands of these nudes on on galleries. Are parents looking? They couldn't be because the parents can be charged for possession of child pornography. And we had an incident in London, Ontario. A 9-year-old was sending videos over TikTok to a 35-year-old. And the FBI tipped off the police. And this is a scenario most parents would not want to have. The police came knocking at their door at 6:45, opened the door, confiscated all computer equipment, the parents and the child's, because the parents are suspect. Are they allowing this? Because there are some parents allowing this and selling these videos for their income. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Do you want to have that conversation with the police? And that's not just parents, grandparents. Are kids visiting you with your wide open networks? Are you looking at what they're doing while they're in your home? A child visiting another kid. What are they doing?
Yeah, that's incredible. Charlene Doki Bauer, founder of Internet Sense First. Thanks a lot for joining me today from Ontario.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you so much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.